Vince here from Baseball and Whatever. Do you like sports? Do you feel your current sporting news provider isn't giving you enough? If you answered yes to both of those, and I hope not out loud, go check out Belly Up Sports Network at bellyupsports.com. They have news articles and podcasts covering a wide variety of sports topics, from baseball to NASCAR. Belly Up Sports, for all your sporting news needs.
What's up, guys? Justin here, Greg's here, Vinny's here. We are back with another episode of Baseball and Whatever after taking a nice week off for New Year's last week. I think we'd done 35 weeks in a row and 75 pieces of content, so it was a nice little break. I didn't know what to do with my Thursday last week. I was exhausted. It was peaceful, but
all I know is I was asleep.
You were asleep. It was a good turn of events to take the night off. I think it all worked out. So we're back. We're recharged. We have an amazing special guest. We have referenced him many times, our New York Mets correspondent, but he is so much more. Jack Lugo, host of the Bond and Banter podcast, is here to join us. We're going to talk a little Bond, a little Mets, a little baseball, some information about the 30 for 30 they did about Once Upon a Time in Queens that ESPN did, about the 86 Mets. We'll get into all that. So again, if this is your first time listening to us, welcome. Feel free to contact us at baseballandwhatever@gmail.com or baseballandwhateverpodcast at bellyupsports.com. Check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/baseballandwhatever and tweet us at baseballandwhat. And without further ado, I'm going to shut up and throw it to the man who orchestrated this amazing interview we have planned for you guys. Greg, take it away.
Thank you, Justin. As Justin said, joining us this evening is the host of the Bond and Banter podcast, Jack Lugo himself, also longtime contributor to James Bond Radio and the Comics of Bond. Jack, welcome to Baseball and Whatever. Thank you for joining us. You seem like a good fit for us. We got a lot of the same interests, and our podcasts are even structured similarly. So thank you for jumping on with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I was, we talked about this when you came on to my podcast, Greg. Both of our podcasts are kind of structured very similarly. What I start off mine is a Bond podcast, and we start off with a sketch. Each guest, I have a guest on every episode, for every episode, we start off the episode with like a sketch that's very focused on Bond, and really, my guest plays a character and I interview them in character, and a lot of hilarity ensues. And then after the sketch is over, we say goodbye to the fictional guest, and then I talk to my guests for real, and we just basically we don't just talk about James Bond, we talk about whatever we have in common, whether it's books, movies, music, whatever, and you guys, I've listened to a lot of your episodes, and it's very similar with the kind of structure. You guys, obviously talk baseball, but you also, you brought in to other topics as well. So, it's fun to be here. Thank you for having me.
We always said, Jack, that we would always shoot ourselves if it was just baseball, especially now if we had to do a podcast with an MLB. Like, we would literally have nothing else to talk about. So that's why we introduced Whatever, so we could keep it fun. And yes, I was a guest on Bond and Banter. You can go check that out. I got to say, Jack, when I first took a look at the questionnaire that you sent me for the sketch comedy bit, I was kind of I was a little nervous about that because those questions looked very hard. And I know you had Shayla Miller on your podcast too. She's been a frequent guest, and she was on after me one time, and she goes, "Are these questions usually that hard?" We were texting back and forth, and I'm like, "Yeah, but to get a good starting point, and then just kind of take off from there, do the best you can." So it was we had to do some thinking, but it was a lot of fun to do in the end. So, and terrifying, but
I appreciate it. Both you and Shayla did great. I also have Bill is also a frequent guest.
Yes, we had Bill on. Yep.
Well. And, it does take a little bit of effort with the improv portion, but we try to keep it fun. So I am trying to get more guests in the Bond fan community to come on with me, because some of them just get intimidated by the whole sketch process. prospect.
It can be intimidating, yeah.
But like once you get through it, it's a lot of fun. And,
yeah,
and the conversation afterwards is always very light. And,
very easygoing. Yeah,
we have a ball.
I wanted to ask you, Jack, really quick before we get started. We've been podcasting for what, 9 months now, guys, or something like that.
April to January. Yeah, April to January,
something like that. Jack, how did you get involved with podcasting? Was it? I know I first heard you on JBR. This was maybe 6 years ago. Was that kind of like your first step into the podcast world? We know you've done movie reviews. Obviously, you host now, but what was kind of like that intro into podcasting for you?
Yeah, it was finding JBR. I hadn't really been that much into podcasts or anything. This was back in around like 2014, and JBR had just started their podcast. So I was just kind of looking for a James Bond podcast, and I saw that this James Bond radio podcast had just started around the same time that I was looking at podcasts, and I decided to give it a listen, and and this was like maybe they had maybe 3 or 4 episodes by that point.
It was very new,
very early days of podcasting, and I got in touch with Tom and Chris, and it started with me just writing blog posts for their website, because when you start a podcast, you usually either have a website or you need a web page to kind of host the show. So they were trying to come up with ideas for content for the website itself, other than just the episodes they were doing. So that's when I started contributing blog posts, various things that sort of were sort of like a companion pieces to the episodes that they were doing. If there was a topic that sort of sparked my interest, I would look into it, do some research, and there would be a blog post about it. So I did that for a while, and then after a few years, they asked me to kind of help them run their social media, so like their Facebook and Twitter posts and stuff, and basically just sort of keep things current if there's like Bond news that because what would happen is initially what I would do is if there was Bond news, I would send a piece to them, like a Variety article or whatever it was. I would send it to them, and then they would post it. But rather than go through that process, it was just easier if I just posted it myself. So they gave me access to their social media pages, and basically I just kind of help sort of keep the followers up to date with whatever's going on in the world of Bond. And then eventually they invited me to do more and like come on the podcast with them, and then I eventually ended up hosting the Comics of Bond segments, which were basically, for those unfamiliar, Bond actually started off as a comic strip before the films. Even like the comic strip started in like 1958, and there have been comic iterations of Bond, ever since. And and a lot of the fans are not aware of it. I mean, some of the hardcore fans are, a lot of the hardcore fans are aware of them, but it's a fun thing to investigate, because it's other iterations of the character that maybe aren't as out there as the mainstream the mainstream fans aren't really aware of, and different creative people are behind those projects, those comics projects. So it's interesting to sort of get into what creative decisions they make, as opposed to the creative decisions that like people at Eon who make the films and stuff, and even like the people who do the authors to do the continuation novels and stuff. So it just kind of it started with like initially just me contacting Tom and Chris and be like, hey, can I help out? And then it just kind of evolved from there.
And you joined the family from there, pretty much. So.
Yeah. No, sorry, it's a long answer.
No, it's okay.
No, it's good.
That's okay. That's a lot better than our story. Our story was, hey, should we start a podcast? We're like, yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, is anyone going to listen? I don't know.
Lo and behold, we're here. Lo and behold, we're here. And it actually turned turned out to be something bigger than we thought. So
and then last year, we were dealing with COVID, and I'm good friends with Bill Koenig, who does the Spy Command, and he was a guest on your podcast.
Yeah.
And I chat with him, and then while we were chatting, he just happened to mention that he does a good Michael G. Wilson impression. So for those people who aren't aware, Michael G. Wilson is one of the co-producers of the Bond franchise, along with his half-sibling Barbara Broccoli. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if he did his Michael G. Wilson impression, and I interviewed him in character and do like a sketch, and that's how the idea sort of evolved from that. And I took influences from I'm a long time Howard Stern listener. I've been listening since I was in high school. So Howard Stern would have these a fake David Letterman or a fake Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator call in, and it would be crazy because it would just be funny. And then there are some news outlets that would think that it was the real Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think one time he had Arnold the impersonator, and at the time he was governor of California, and he was talking about blowing up the moon to stop women's periods or whatever. And actual news outlets would pick up the story oh, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, wants to blow up the moon. It was crazy, but basically, they're fun little things that sketches and stuff that I appealed to me, and I figured with the Bond universe that there are a whole bunch of characters outside of just the main characters of Bond and Moneypenny and whatever. So someone could come on and play Blofeld, someone could come on and play Willard White like Greg did, and I would just and you get different perspectives into the lives of those characters in the films just by talking and stuff. So that's kind of the idea, sort of evolved from that, of just getting together with friends and like-minded people, fans, and just sort of you kind of gain a fresh perspective into these characters, and it makes you look at the characters and the universe of Bond in a new way.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's exactly what we had going on there, and as intimidating as it was, and trying to make up a backstory was still a lot of fun because it left a lot of stuff open for interpretations. So,
I gotta say though, Greg and Jack, to your credit, I'll be the first to admit, besides GoldenEye and then playing a bunch of Bond video games, I don't know. I know who Sean Connery is. I know who all these people are, but the fact that the improv, and as somebody who did improv and theater and stuff in high school, so that aspect, but then also combining that with Bond and then also having the podcast, I love listening to your show. So somebody who doesn't even have a Bond background, I think it's a great combination. So well done. I don't know what that means coming from a non-Bond fan, but well done in general. So
yeah. Greg's character Willard White was based on Howard Hughes, and as obviously he's a reclusive, eccentric millionaire, billionaire, whatever, and he has this thing about he spent a lot of time in the bathroom, and Greg as Willard White would be oh, I'm gonna be in the John, which is where I do all my best thinking, and it's it was just funny. So Greg did a phenomenal job. I had so much fun with Greg.
Excellent. It was a good time. It was a good time.
All right. Well, we'll dive into some Bond here. So one of I think our very first guest, I still don't know why he came on, but he was nice enough to come on. Joe Darlington, who I know you've collaborated with as well. One of the big things we talked with him was we talked a lot about GoldenEye and the movie and the video game and just growing up with that. At least for me, it was a big deal. But first question, did you ever play GoldenEye? Did you get into it as well? What was your take on it? And then I'll ask you a follow-up one after that.
Okay, well, Joe actually, I think, lives about 15 minutes away from me. So we, I don't see him a whole lot because he works, I work, and all that stuff. But yeah, I chat with him, and I've gotten together with him on his show. Basically, GoldenEye, the video game. I don't have any strong memories of the original GoldenEye Nintendo 64 game. I think by the time Nintendo 64 came out, I did have one. I do remember playing the game, but I think I was maybe 16 or 17 years old by that time. So I I had kind of grown out of, because I used to love playing video games. The original Nintendo system and Super Nintendo systems, I was really hardcore into those. By the time Nintendo 64 came out, I still got it and I was still into it, but I wasn't playing video games as much as I was when I was younger. But when I got older, though, since we've had Tommy, we still have our Wii, the Nintendo Wii. I think we have a Wii U actually now, and we got they came out with a version of the GoldenEye game for the Wii.
Yeah, Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig. Yeah, so I guess it's a licensing thing. Like whoever the current Bond is, I gets to be the character. So yeah, no, I actually pulled this out because in case you guys were gonna.
Oh, there you go, perfect.
There it is.
007. There it is, right there.
Yeah. So I have this. I've been playing this, for a few years now. I still haven't gotten very far.
Well, it's hard on the Wii. It wasn't designed for a game like that almost. So.
It is like this. When you have to have the nunchuck and like a rifle thing, and the remote and like
pointing.
The way you play, like I'm terrible at it. So I mean, I do play it on occasion. Sometimes I get in the mood to play it. But the original the N64 game, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it was a fun game to play. I remember, but I don't have too many strong memories of playing it. But it is a phenomenal game. It was a game changer for first person shooters. Like,
pretty revolutionary.
And they got a lot of kids into Bond at that time, which I think is something that's missing now. I think like the way that the franchise is run now, they don't really make that much of an effort to appeal to younger generation.
I think that's a really great point. So that leads me to my follow-up is on Twitter a few weeks ago. As soon as I saw it, I immediately had to
You sent it to me, Justin.
I sent it to Greg because I knew I know who it was going to apply to, but it leaked recently that it looked like there was a remaster of GoldenEye coming out for the new generation of consoles. So do you think, I mean, big picture, do you think that's something that maybe they're planning to kind of re-release the game in part of like the 60th anniversary? Or maybe is that to try and draw in new fans who maybe haven't experienced, GoldenEye and Pierce Brosnan and all that? Or do you think it's just kind of a cash dump? Like, hey, we know we can make some money on this. We might as well release it again.
It really depends on the company making it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mean to sound cynical, but it could possibly just be a cash grab.
Yeah,
I mean, I got my cash.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sad thing. Yeah.
I'm hoping that it isn't. I mean, I might look into getting it regardless, but yeah, I'm sure that there will be some effort to market it to me, I just don't think they're doing enough to appeal to younger generation. Like I think Bond should really be a part of Comic-Con. Like I don't understand why there isn't a Bond panel at Comic-Con.
Yeah, that would be a huge market to tap into, right?
Yeah, developing more video games. I know they've done some things with like there was one that was like you can there's a racing game where you can drive the Aston Martin and stuff.
That was Forza Horizon 4 that had a DLC.
Had that in there,
with 12 of the Bond cars or something. So,
but yeah, I think you needed like an Xbox or something. I'm like,
it was an Xbox One Xbox One, I think it was.
So like, I like those things would be great. I mean, I know like my son is into Roblox and stuff, and so I mean, they do need to sort of branch out and sort of try to reach the younger generation, because I feel like the demographics are those of us who are into Bond are tend to be older and stuff.
I mean, I don't have any background in marketing or anything like that, but I would think if you made, and granted, I don't know how the Bond purists would feel about this, but if you made a show similar to the way Star Wars is doing the Mandalorian and Boba Fett, if you took something like a young James Bond and made a series or a mini series, I think that'd be a gold mine. You would get new people in if it was decent, but it sounds like, I mean, from what I've read about Eon, it sounds like they're very against anything like that. Does that sound about right?
They're very resistant, and actually there already exists, like the literary Bond has been a bit looser because the Ian Fleming publications, they actually did license some authors to write a young Bond series taking place around before World War II, so like 1930s, when Bond would have been like 13. And there is a series of young Bond books that are actually really good. They're actually historical novels, and the author Charlie Hickson, who wrote like the first 5 or 6 of them, he actually used certain historical events as like the backdrops of like, okay, this is what the young Bond experienced back in the 1930s, and this led to that, and it sort of leads into what could be like the literary Bond that Fleming created. So like it actually it honors the spirit of Fleming's creation. It's not just like a kid's book. It's actually something that adults can enjoy too. I wish they would pursue something like that with like if now that Amazon is looking to acquire MGM, they're going to want more Bond content. So I'm hoping that they would sort of explore that, but Barbara Broccoli and Michael J. Wilson, who run Eon, have been
they're too old.
Yeah, I mean,
they want to just
dinosaurs.
They want to put out a film every 5 or 6 years, and I think
absolute torture.
Franchises,
no reason for that.
You can't, you have to keep your franchise out there in the popular culture if you want it to remain relevant. And unfortunately, they seem to look at want to keep going the old fashioned, kind of keep the status quo.
Yeah,
which I don't understand. I know there are Bond fans who disagree, who are totally with them and don't want to see any of that, but I'm not one of them. I would rather that they put out more content and actually
something, anything.
Yeah.
So we don't keep talking about the same 24, 25 movies, left and right. So not that I, because I'll never stop talking about them, but it'd be nice.
I think even like an animated series, you can do like a series, like an animated young Bond series, and it doesn't have to conflict with whatever they want to do with the films. It can just be its own continuity, its own thing. But so far they've been very resistant, and that's something that we talk a lot about on my podcast with, Greg and Bill. We always complain about Eon's sort of old-fashioned thinking.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, Vinny, I'm going to throw it to you now.
All right, Jack, unlike Justin, I've actually seen I haven't seen that many more, but I've seen more than him. I haven't seen No Time to Die yet, but unfortunately the big spoiler was revealed to me.
I was there for this.
Yeah.
Oh, you were.
Yep. Saw it happen live.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
On the currents where big spoilers are ruined for me. Question for you: will I be able to still enjoy the movie knowing the big spoiler in it?
It depends. I mean, I kind of knew the spoiler beforehand too, because I was told to sort of get off Twitter, because what happens with Bond is that they release the film in the UK about like 8 days or 2 weeks sometimes before it gets released in the United States. So they have the UK premiere, which they call the world, which is like the royal world premiere. They have members of the royal family come in, and like some influencers in the Bond communities get to go, like Tom and Chris and other like Bond podcasters and stuff. They get I mean, it's sort of uncertain every time whether or not they can go, but they've gone to like the last 2 for Spectre and then for Time to Die. So they get to see the film before anyone else, and then usually they're very good about spoilers. Like obviously Tom and Chris were avoided talking spoilers, but on Twitter you'll see fans who have gone to the premiere or have gone to see the Bond film before it comes out in the US, and I did run across I guess I don't know, I've been avoiding sort of saying who it is, because who was that spoiled it for me, but I guess now it's kind of it's been enough time that I don't think that they would get in trouble really. But it was Andrew Lycett who actually wrote a couple Fleming wrote a Fleming biography that that I followed on Twitter, and he actually posted something about how this is a spoiler. I'm spoiling it for anyone who hasn't seen the film. But so spoiler alert: if you haven't seen No Time to Die, like skip over the section because I don't want to get in trouble. I'll be guilty of the same thing. So I'm sure the spoiler that you're talking about is that Bond dies in the film. So Andrew Lycett sort of, I came across a tweet from him, and I kind of tried to shut it out of my mind, because at the same time, like, even though he's, I don't think he had any reason to make anything up when he tweeted that. So I kind of, I didn't have any reason to believe that he was lying, but I did sort of like shut it out of my memory. I tried to watch the film objectively without that in my mind, and I was able to do it. And I think, like, even if you know what happens in the film, you can still enjoy it. I mean, I would say the first half is probably the most enjoyable, because that's just kind of like classic, shoot 'em up kind of Roger Moore style Bond a little bit. So this is my opinion, but I mean, you get to see the DB5 really in action for the first time, because even though we've had the DB5 a lot, especially in Daniel Craig's run, we haven't really seen it in a proper chase. So I'm glad I know Bond fans complain about seeing the DB5 too much because you don't want it.
And I don't get why. Like, that's a state. I mean, it's a staple. We finally see it with machine guns and everything.
Yeah. So, and Skyfall, it was just like in a stationary position. It was in front of the house, in front of the property, and you got to see it shoot the guns, but you didn't actually see it, in a chase. Like you got to see it driving, because they had to drive to the Scotland location and stuff, but you didn't actually see it in action, like, in a proper chase. So in No Time to Die, you do get a really good DB5 chase. And then there's also a really good Cuba sequence with Ana de Armas, who is phenomenal in this movie. Like, great casting with her.
And this was before, like, Knives Out, but because they filmed this before Knives Out, or was it afterwards?
They filmed it after Knives Out.
Oh, okay.
She had starred Knives Out along with Daniel Craig, and she plays like a CIA sort of agent who's sort of like, has only been in training for a couple of weeks, and Bond isn't sure how she's going to do in the field with her, and then lo and behold, she actually really does phenomenally well, and she's able to shoot and do martial arts and all that stuff. So it's there's some great fight sequences. I think knowing the ending of a film doesn't necessarily keep you from enjoying it if it's a good film. So but the one thing I will say about this movie is that I think your enjoyment of it, like whether you like it or not, depends a lot on how invested you are in the romance of Bond and Madeline Swan, the two characters who were in. Madeline was also in Spectre. She became the main love interest in the Spectre movie, which was the previous film. So if you are invested in their romance, then you're gonna really like it. If you're not really that invested in it, this film may change your mind, because I really wasn't really convinced about their romantic relationship in the prior film, but I do think that this film really does cement their relationship. So you have to kind of be open to a story that sort of explores what Bond is like in relationships, which is kind of like, if you're going to a Bond movie, you're going there for a lot of people go there for action. They're not necessarily going to want to see a movie that explores Bond's trust issues and that kind of thing, being in a romantic relationship and stuff. If you're open to that, then this movie is for you. If you're not open to that and you just want to see wall-to-wall action, then this film will probably let you down in some ways. So it really depends. I am kind of like open-minded when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't mind seeing a good solid romance along with Bond. So so I enjoyed it. But I think everyone's different. It's been a divisive film. Like I can't I can't blame anyone for not liking it. I know I got into some trouble because I think I was trying to explain this on Twitter, and because of the character limit or the way context works on Twitter, people sort of misinterpreted what I said. And
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah,
I would say before you go on, Jack, I would say you were much more civil than I was.
Oh yeah, so. Yeah, I was. Oh boy.
Yeah, because like I guess and maybe I probably wrote it in a way that it could be taken out of the context, but basically, like having watching like approaching a Bond film where you're dealing with trust issues and relationships, you basically, it's kind of mature subject matter, in a way, that you're not used to seeing in a Bond film. Like you're used to seeing that in other more dramatic films, but not necessarily in Bond. So I guess I wrote something, I was trying to explain that, and then someone interpreted it as me saying, oh, well, if you don't like this film, you're immature, which is not what I meant at all. It's basically that, yes, the film sort of, it has this sort of mature subject matter that you're kind
it has more dramatic themes. It has more,
right.
Like quote unquote adult themes to it. It's deeper than your traditional, like, Roger Moore raising an eyebrow sort of thing.
Right.
Oh, James, it's less of that. So,
right. It's
which I do miss too.
It's not a romp. It's not, like necessarily like the previous Bond movies. And
right.
There are more adult themes,
yes.
That you have to sort of be open to and receptive to. And there are Bond fans who have been fans for a long time, longer than me and longer than who are not necessarily receptive to that they they just want to go to Bond and have a good time and feel good about the character and sort of be invigorated by the end of the film. And and then so those fans left disappointed. But there are, but if you're the type of fan who's kind of open to, exploring, the more adult themes and, and more receptive to the dramatic, aspect of the film, then you're more likely to enjoy it. So it really just depends on, how you approach the film.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm still excited to see.
It's a long answer. I'm sorry.
Perfect. Adds a little bit more for me going into it, knowing what it's going to be about. Greg complains a lot about Eon Productions. I think Justin and I can agree. Maybe a little.
I've learned a lot about Eon through osmosis of Greg's complaining and venting, I think.
And he didn't even ask to learn about it. It's just knowledge that he's inherited, and he's like, I don't know what to do with this. So,
time on Eon Productions. But one thing I did pitch to Greg that I might as well ask you: we would like to have you back on, but would you like to come back on when there is a new James Bond actor? And how long do you think that's going to be before that picks somebody?
Oh, jeez. Well, of course, I'd love to come on anytime. Hopefully, I come back on before they pick a new Bond actor.
It might be a while.
Because it might be a while. Like, I know there are some fans who are hopeful that they might make an announcement this year because it's the 60th anniversary of the film franchise this year. But I'm doubtful because I think they're going to want to take some time. And usually, I don't think they're going to announce the new actor until they're ready to begin filming the next film, shooting the next film. So they would need a script already and a director and all that stuff. And then also we don't know how the Amazon deal is going to shape up. So I have a feeling we're not going to hear anything from the Bond franchise at all this year. So I think that the earliest we'll probably hear an announcement as to who the new actor will probably be next year or maybe even the year after. And
Jack's usually spot on with this stuff. So I know he's right. I don't want him to be right, but no, he's according to Eon, like that is like soonest, that we could hear something, but
yeah, and also they had this thing that they want Daniel Craig to sort of enjoy his moment. I mean, Barbara Broccoli has been very enamored with Daniel Craig, to the point that we do make fun of it on my podcast. Because
I'm sorry, it's been 15 years. He's had it for 15 years. He's the longest tenure guy. I think he's enjoyed it long enough, Jack. So.
Yeah, that would be my position too. Like, I like Daniel Craig, but I feel like he's had his moment.
Yes, for a long time.
So I think it's gonna be a while, and I don't think when they do announce the next actor, I don't think it'll be anyone who's sort of been floated around in the media as a potential new actor. Like, I don't think it'll be Henry Cavill or any of the people they're talking about. I think
like Tom Hardy or something like that. Yeah.
No, I think it'll be someone that like is barely on our radar.
That we don't even know. We're not really even paying attention to right now, or we might even know even an unknown. Right. At the time, because Daniel Craig was he was in a lot of stuff, but he wasn't in kind of like in mainstream Hollywood films or what. I think the biggest, obviously Layer Cake came out right before, but then he had a supporting role in Tomb Raider and a couple other smaller films. So, he was in Road to Perdition, but just kind of off everyone's radar. So,
yeah, I have a feeling it'll be the same with the next actor as well.
So, I got to say, with that, oh, sorry, Vinny.
No, I was going to say, who would you like to see be the next James Bond?
Honestly, I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not really enthusiastic about any of the ones that are sort of, been like Henry Cavill, Tom Hardy, or any. I'm not really that enthusiastic. Like if Henry Cavill got it, I would be okay with it, but it would be a safe choice. I think that it is likely that there'll be an actor of color. I know for a while Idris Elba has been floated as, but this was around the time of Spectre. Like, he's actually probably a little too old for the role right now, and I think they did kind of talk to him about maybe appearing as a villain in the next Bond movie, which would be great. Idris Elba is a phenomenal actor, and I think he would have made a great Bond if they had gotten to him sooner. Like, if they had signed him up like right after Spectre debuted, and instead of sticking with Daniel Craig for another 6 years while they make this movie, I think Idris Elba could have made a phenomenal Bond, but I don't think it's too late right now. I think he's too old. Because you how many movies are you going to make? Once the actor's already well into their 50s. So it's I don't know. There's no name that I'm sort of like lobbying for right now.
Okay.
I'm still upset about that. I know you touched on the Amazon deal, but that whole digital code thing with the 4K Blu-ray that was only on iTunes. I was like, here's MGM being bought by Amazon. Movies being released by Universal, but the digital code only works on iTunes.
Yeah, I saw your tweet about that. Because I got the same code. Like, I bought the 4K version of No Time to Die, and I do use the iTunes because you're able because even though I have like an older generation Apple TV that I don't use that much, but I have a Fire Stick. And on the Fire Stick, you can download the Apple TV app, so you can access the movies that you buy on iTunes on your Fire Stick through the Apple TV app on your Fire Stick. So
maybe I'll have to do that.
But you can't get the special features on that. So like the only way you can get the special features, is through an Apple TV if you're doing the iTunes. So I didn't mind that it was Apple TV. What I was more upset about is that for Christmas I got the Daniel Craig collection on 4K, and that came with the digital code, and you can only redeem that at Vudu, and I don't use Vudu. It's connected to Fandango, and I actually tried to redeem it, and then like it told me that I had like a Vudu account set up, and I couldn't remember the password. And then I went to forget password, and I tried to get a new password, and I kept trying to get it, and like they never sent me. They're supposed to send you an email to renew your password, or to do a new password, and I never got the email. So I was like, I'm never gonna get this digital, and I wouldn't have a way to watch it anyway because I don't know if I can connect Vudu to my Fire Stick or whatever. So it's like it's not even worth it. But you would think that like at least for that collection, the first the first four that Daniel Craig did, that they would at least have the iTunes option, but it's only Vudu. So like who uses Vudu? I don't know, and I doubt anyone I know uses Vudu.
A couple of people on Twitter were using Voodoo, but I think they were the only two. So, like I said, I think I have a Voodoo account, but I haven't accessed it probably since I created the account. So,
yeah,
I think most of my stuff is on probably Amazon, because I got a large Amazon library of digital codes and stuff like that. So, well, I do have an iTunes account. Maybe I'll resurrect it or something, or I should just trade it with you, Jack. You give me your Voodoo one, I'll give you my iTunes one, so you can have two. So, but yeah, the special features are all I want to watch. The Blu-rays just for the collection. That's just for the appearance on the shelf, because I watch all the special features and then I turn on Diamonds Are Forever. So, and then call it a night. So, that was a bit upsetting, but I want to shift gears a little bit because you are a huge Mets fan. We are a baseball podcast, and we wanted to touch on both, obviously. So, but to give you a little history of us first, I mean, we haven't been, since we started this, we haven't been the biggest Mets supporters over the years. I know Justin had a couple. Justin had a couple of run-ins.
I had a bad experience at my bachelor party. And I shouldn't say this is all Mets fans, but the 3 or 4 that were sitting next to us were. Vinny, how would you describe them? I don't know. They were pretty.
I thought it was like 2 Mets fans, and there were like 2 Cubs fans with them too. It wasn't.
No. Cubs fans are an annoying bunch too. I will be the first to admit that.
Then they were making fun of another Mets fan who had like a Matt Harvey
that's right
jersey that it looked like he just opened it up out of the packet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
This would have been 2013. So
okay.
Matt Harvey was still
Matt Harvey was still good. Yeah,
he was still the Gotham Knight. Right? So, yeah.
But Jack, since we've started this podcast, we've connected with many Mets fans, yourself included, over social media and guest appearances on respective podcasts. So kind of give us the background. How did you become a Mets fan? Why the Mets over the Yankees there in New York?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Queens. I live in New Jersey now, but I pretty much lived like all my life in Queens. Before we lived in New Jersey for about 3 years now. So before that, I lived in Queens all my life, and then I was my maternal I used to spend summers with my maternal grandparents in Puerto Rico, and my grandfather was a Dodgers fan, a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And when they moved to Los Angeles, he kind of became a Mets fan by default, but he would still root for the Dodgers if the Mets were playing the Dodgers, or and if the Dodgers got to the playoffs, he'd root for the Dodgers. But basically, I grew up as a Mets fan, and then my dad kind of introduced me to the Mets, and then it was kind of cooler to be a Mets fan when I was little. Like when I was a kid, back in the '80s, like it was cooler to be a Mets fan than it was to be a Yankees fan. I mean, and not just because we were in Queens, but the Mets had a lot going for them at that time. I grew up. I was like maybe 6 or 7 years old in the '86 season. I remember going to being in Little League and trying to do I was a catcher, so I was trying to do Gary Carter's batting stance. When I was in Little League, and there were other kids who were Yankees fans, but it felt like the only thing the Yankees had going for them at that time in the '80s was they had Don Mattingly and they had Dave Winfield, and obviously they had an obnoxious the rich owner in George Steinbrenner, and George Steinbrenner would even reprimand the players. He would call Dave Winfield Mr. May, and because he obviously making that sort of comparison to Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson was Mr. October, Dave Winfield was Mr. May. The Yankees just seemed like an obnoxious team when I was a kid, and I just wanted to me it was cool to be a Mets fan at that time. And that's the team that I kind of that I stuck with, and I have a lot of fond memories of following those '80s Mets teams. I guess I kind of grew up around the right time to be a Mets fan and to be from Queens. That's kind of how that sort of evolved.
I mean, I guess for prior to the lockout, which is going on month number 2 at this point, I think, Greg, it seems like it's been an eternity, but I think prior to that, you were our number one Mets contributor. So thank you, first of all, Jack. But this offseason, in terms of the Mets, I mean, you have the Eduardo Escobar signing. You have the Steve Cohen getting upset with Steven Matz when he didn't sign with them. You have, the Mets front office is getting all shook up just because of the signings of Mark Canha and Starling Marte. You got Max Scherzer coming. You got Buck Showalter coming in. You still have, Francisco Lindor and Greg's guy, James McCann, which I think he's still upset the Sox let him go. But
James McCann.
And Pete Alonso, too, and Brandon Nimmo. And I mean, all these guys that look amazing. So I guess what I'm asking is, they finished in third last year. How do you feel about going into this season, whenever it starts, if it starts? Where do you see them ending up in a perfect world, I guess?
Well, they on paper they look great. My concern is that the hitting, because obviously we're known to sort of with DeGrom and all these prior seasons, every time DeGrom would start, he would have an amazing start, and the Mets would score one run for him.
Oh yeah.
I think they are looking once the lockout ends, they are looking to do more. I think they were looking into Chris Bryant. If they do get Chris Bryant, I think they would move Escobar to second base. Mm-hmm. And then I think they are looking to trade McNeil. So we'll see.
He might end up a White Sox. There's a lot of McNeil White Sox rumors.
Yeah, McNeil might end up going to the White Sox. So, so I mean, obviously everything's dependent on the lockout ending. But they are looking to make some moves, and I think they may not even be done with starting pitching. I think they were looking into Carlos Rondon, even after signing Scherzer. So, I'm very hopeful. The last few decades under the Wilpons have just been awful. The team has been, they would just refuse to spend any money. And they were always trying to get under the luxury tax threshold. It was just a poorly, the team was just, the front office was just, disorganized and dysfunctional for so many years. So now they're starting to really put their act together. Although there have been moments of doubt, like that whole Steven Matz controversy. I don't really think that Steve Cohen really should have gone on Twitter to complain about losing Steven Matz.
That was something.
There were other things, like that. Seriously, I know they wanted Steven Matz, but is that really what you're hanging your hopes on? And this is before the Scherzer signing, so obviously, we didn't know they were going to get Scherzer at that time when this whole thing unfolded with Steven Matz. But I'm like, why is Steven Matz that important? He's like your number. He's like a mediocre number 4 starter or 5th starter on any decent team. So why would you want Steve? Why would you get so upset about Steven Matz? I've no idea.
Got really upset.
Yeah, it was surreal to see.
Of rage, breaking Twitter and everything.
I imagine him with his phone, just slapping the key, the touchscreen on Twitter, as he's tweeting these things out. But were you, in general, what was your take on? Were you happy with the Buck Showalter signing as a manager? Are you content? Were you looking for someone else? What's your take on that?
I'm content. I think I know he's kind of an old school manager, which I think is what the Mets kind of need. They need someone with experience. They need someone who's sort of going to be respected. I like Luis Rojas. I think he does have potential to grow into being a good manager. Mm-hmm. But I think what the problem with Luis Rojas is, I think the players sort of regarded him more as a peer, and then he didn't really he didn't really manage with any urgency when the Mets still had a shot. to make a playoff run, he kind of still played every game as if it was like the second week of April or something, like and like when you had games where you really needed to win, he just was very lackadaisical. So I think at the end of the day, I mean he was a valuable member of the organization for a long time. Like he had I think an analytics role prior to being a manager. So I know he's now the Yankees third base coach, I believe. So I have nothing against him personally. I think I just think he didn't have the experience, and it shows. So I think getting someone like Buck Showalter, who has the experience, has the respect of the players, is going to go a long way. And I think they just signed Eric Chavez to be the hitting coach.
Yep.
I saw that today. Yeah.
Yeah. So that seems very promising, and they're looking for a bench coach. I think the rumor is that, basically they want a younger, more analytics-driven bench coach to sort of counterbalance Buck Showalter, who's more of an old school, manager. So I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm happy, so far with what I see. As with any, being a Mets fan for this many years, they're always like peaks and valleys, and the highs are really high and the lows are really low. So I feel like we're at least, there's at least a light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas before the Steve Cohen, taking over the ownership of the Mets before that, when it was the Wilpons, it felt like we would be in the abyss forever. At least, so I am hopeful now.
Excellent. Yeah, nothing but the best. And that NL East, the more competitive it is, the more exciting it is to watch. So that would be great to see them, make a run. So, all right, go ahead, Vinny.
Yep, Jack, Justin and I are both Cub fans, and the Mets and the Cubs kind of have some ties starting mid-season last year when the Cubs traded Trevor Williams and Javi Baez to the Mets for Pete Crow Armstrong, and then now the Cubs signing Marcus Stroman in the offseason adds even more ties to the Mets and the Cubs. Is there any insight you can give us on Stroman? What Cub fans should expect from him, and maybe something that Cub fans don't know from just reading the stats on him?
Stroman is a decent pitcher. Like I think he does get combative on Twitter. Like I never tweeted him or anything, but I've seen other fans who like they'll get pissed off after a start or something, and they'll tweet something out, and he'll like go at it with them. So like or he'll block them, and then you get to see them complain about being blocked. But he's actually, I mean, he was consistent. Like he actually, I think like the Mets' problem over the last couple of seasons has been offense. So like, he would have decent starts, and the Mets' offense just would not, he score runs for him. So like, he probably shouldn't have had as many losses as he had. And like he can give you a solid 6 or 7 innings every start. So like he's actually pretty reliable and dependable in that way. So I think Cub fans will be happy with him. I knew that every time Stroman started that it was going to probably be a close game, and it all depended really on the Mets offense. So like I didn't really have doubts about Stroman. I was just like, okay, he can't let them score more than 2 runs, otherwise
it's over. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my feeling on Stroman. Like I think he's a decent pitcher, so I wish him luck.
Nice, good, because we need starters.
We're gonna need it.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise signing in Chicago, one that was really welcome, and I was like, certainly like, wow, that is something. So, getting a name like him, so
super excited about that. Jack, do you want to give us any your final thoughts on Javi Baez's tenure? That's like it was kind of all over the place. But yeah, what was your reaction, and I guess what you've been hearing from other Mets fans?
Yeah, I mean, the Mets fans aren't too thrilled with him. I mean, he has, I mean, actually he has a pretty decent stat line, you know, like he had it, you know, like he, on paper, he actually, you know, put up some decent numbers. But there were just too many of those inconsistencies, and you know, obviously he had a few moments where he blew up. There was that whole thing that became a meme where he like swung at the ball that was like way out in front, like wasn't even anywhere close, and that became like a meme. And then you had the whole thumbs down controversy. Which,
yeah, that was something.
Which was, you know, like I think everyone sort of overreacted to, but at the same time, it's like you don't want to see a player give thumbs down to the fans that are trying to cheer him on. You know, it's like come on, like seriously, like don't you have, you know, like, and then to actually tell the media that that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
But yeah,
I mean, so it just like poor judgment and stuff. So I mean, it was, you know, he was with us for a few months and now he's gone, and I'm not that sad that he's gone, to be honest.
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, we knew the Cubs were selling off right there, but his whole time in New York, I mean, we continued to follow him. I mean, it wasn't hard to follow him.
No,
it was kind of all over Twitter, all over sports news or whatever, just all the ups and downs. And getting back, I think that kind of what you said before, Jack, about Luis Rojas being the manager. I think with Buck. I think a lot of, you know, the shenanigans that went on with the Mets last year, I think that'll be kind of held more under control with Buck Showalter, a guy who kind of has more command of a clubhouse.
Oh yeah,
like
I guarantee
you were saying.
that if Buck was managing, I don't think that whole thumbs down thing would have
would never happen.
Yeah.
Nope.
So yeah, and like I saw the Tigers signed him for like I think 6 years, $140 million. So I'm like, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, 6 years, $140. That sounds about right. Oh no, it's $140 million. What are you talking about?
Yeah, he definitely got a decent paycheck. I didn't see the Tigers on that for a while there. I was like, oh, is he going back to the Mets or something, or is he going to be a White Sox? But no, lo and behold, it was the Tigers. So, I want to. You were talking about you kind of growing up as a Mets fan, Jack, and you first got me onto the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, Once Upon a Time in Queens, which mainly covers the World Series champion 1986 Mets. It's a 4-part film. It was fantastically done. And I just finished it. I finished the last part a couple weeks ago. And like I said, I truly loved it. It was so interesting, learned a lot, especially the amount of interviews that were in this documentary. I mean, just the name, some of the bigger names: Keith Hernandez, Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden, Mookie Wilson, Lenny Dykstra. Forgot about all of his stuff. But Kevin Mitchell, Wally Backman. But the amount of interviews in this was great, and just the honesty. These guys were just open to sharing just about just about anything. So, like, it was truly well done. The three of us obviously weren't around in 86. Jack, you were very young at this age. So just kind of tell us what you remember. I kind of want to hear your perspective on the season, what you remember, and specifically the famous World Series Game 6. Yeah. Like you said, I think you said you were 7 or 8 at the time, but
I would have been around 7 years old. Yeah.
Okay, but the last part of the documentary kind of focused on the fans' perspective. So I'd like to hear your kind of recap of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a phenomenal season. Like like every my dad actually he VHS, he had the VHS recorder, and he would tape the games, and a lot of times that's how I get to see it. And actually that's how I got to see Game 6, because my mom made me go to sleep the night of Game 6, because that game went, I think, past midnight. she was like, oh, well, no, it's time for bed. You have to go, and I was like, I tried to argue with her and like, to no avail. So I was actually, I missed game 6 because of my mom, to tell me to go to bed. And so I ended up watching it the next day. And then like, he actually had that setup where you had 2 VHS players stacked on top, and then you would record, put a blank tape on one and then put a tape to record, and then there were 2 Mets documentaries that he ended up putting on that tape at that time, which was one was on like the from 1962 to 1985 Mets, and then one was specifically on the 86 season, and we would watch those like every year, like as baseball season started. That would be like a tradition to watch those 2 documentaries. It was just like growing up in Queens, like I felt like, if you're into baseball the way I was, and I was in Little League and stuff, you had to be a Mets fan, so following that team, it definitely, it brings back so many memories. Like my mom, in the documentary, they talk about how they made that "Let's Go Mets."
The "Let's Go Mets" video,
the video and the song. Like I remember my mom bought that vinyl album, and we played that, and would listen to that. It was just, So we would obviously watch the games at night. I mean, my parents were divorced, so I would watched, if as long as my mom let me stay up, I would stay up. But then like the next day or the next weekend, I would, sometimes my dad would have a VHS tape, so I'd go over to my dad's place and we'd watch, a game that he recorded on the VHS, and we'd sit and watch the game. And he was a big Keith Hernandez fan, and like in the documentary, it shows how Keith Hernandez was, like almost a manager on the field, because he basically, coached those players, the young players, Darryl Strawberry in particular. I mean, there's the great segment where like Darryl Strawberry was up at bat in a very pivotal moment, and Keith Hernandez tells him to keep his shoulder down, and he kept his shoulder down, followed his instructions, and hit the home run. And then there was another moment where Jesse Orosco was gassed, and like it had been a really long game, and everyone just wanted to get off the field. And like he said, they had like Davey Johnson, the manager at the time, didn't call a conference, a mound conference or anything. He just but Keith Hernandez did, and he went up to Jesse Orosco and told him, because he saw that he couldn't throw his fastball anymore. He's like, if you throw another fastball, I'll kill you. And so like Jesse Orosco from that point just threw sliders and ended up getting out of the inning and winning the game. That documentary just brought back so many memories of what it was like to be a Mets fan at that time, and what New York was like at that time. Like all the things that were going on in the city, and some of the racial tension that was going on, and obviously, and also some of the stories of the players, things that were going on behind the scenes. Players having sex with groupies in between innings, all that.
Unbelievable.
All the drugs and all that, and it was such a dangerous sort of like time, and it was just, but it was like, it was sort of considered just rebellious and like irreverent fun, and obviously now it would all seem very problematic to have a group of players on the team, acting that way. But back then it was just sort of like, part of like the way things were. And obviously as a 7-year-old kid, I wasn't aware of all this stuff. So that's also why the documentary sort of, appealed to me, because you get to sort of see, you get a new perspective into things. But yeah, I remember just, loving the game of baseball as a kid, and, watching, those games and looking forward to seeing those players on the field. I mean, and they here, and then like you see Gary Carter in commercials, and and all that stuff, and it was just a really it's a time that I have a lot of nostalgia for.
Jack, would you, I mean, obviously with the documentary, they talk about the Mets are struggling, the city's going bankrupt, they trade away Tom Seaver. You know, there's this rogues and rebels mantra that's kind of going around with the team. It kind of gets everybody wrapped up. They get excited. I feel like with being a Chicagoan, it's, you know, the 90s Bulls were great. Everybody has fond memories of those. The 2010, you know, for those that were hockey fans, those were great for Hawks fans because the 3 Stanley Cups. The 2016 Cubs, you know, people look back fondly on that, but they choked afterwards. It was just a nightmare. But the one team that no one in this city will ever shut up talking about, and I can't speak for the other two, but I am so tired of hearing about the 85 Bears. One, because I wasn't alive yet. And two, it's like that was almost 40 years ago now. We need to move on. They've been horrible for about 3 decades now. But that long-winded, you know, mantra there. But do you see, was the 86 Mets, is that the equivalent of like the 85 Bears in New York? Or was there another team in New York City that kind of captured everyone's emotions, like kind of like how the 85 Bears, where 30, 40 years later, people still don't shut up about this team, even though there's so much time that's been going on.
Well, the 80s, the thing about the 86 Mets is, obviously it's been well documented that they struggled with addiction,
yes,
and substance abuse issues and all that stuff. But they actually, I mean, even though they floundered in 87, they actually made it to the NLCS in 88. Mm-hmm. They went up against the Dodgers, and that's, you know, the Dodgers ended up beating them in the Game 7. So, I mean, they came very close in 88, and then after 88, things just sort of
went off the rails. Yeah.
So like, I mean, I remember, like, I mean, I don't have, you know, I remember my grandfather really rooting for that 88 team until they faced off against the Dodgers.
Yeah, then it changed. Yeah.
And then he rooted for the Dodgers, and I was like, you know, kind of upset with him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but then obviously, you know, the Dodgers went to that World Series, and then you had that famous Wade Boggs running the bases with the pump,
the fist pump. Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, that became an iconic moment. That's what everyone remembers now from 88, you know, from baseball in 88. But that 88 team was good. It's just that they you know, there were too many issues on and off the field that sort of like kept them from, you know, and also like they couldn't really keep that team together. I mean, you see in the documentary after they won the championship, you know, the general manager just didn't want to keep that team together. Like he didn't sign Ray Knight. They decided to go with Howard Johnson at third base. Yeah, I mean, the Mets fans still love Howard Johnson to this day, but Ray Knight really should have been able to finish his career with the Mets.
Right.
You know, and like, you know, it just was mismanaged, you know. So yeah, I mean, and then obviously, you know, and the 90s became the decade of the Yankees.
Yeah, for sure.
And then of course, you know, famously they had the Subway Series in 2000, and the Mets, that 2000 Mets team was a great team, but they didn't get very. You know, the World Series only lasted 5. You know, they only won the one game. So it only went 5 games. So I feel like I would have been okay losing to the Yankees if the Mets had maybe taken it to a Game 6 or a Game 7. But to lose in 5 games is, you know, like it sort of like lets the air out of the bubble.
I can't imagine how exciting for the city of New York to have that Subway Series. I know, like, if the Cubs and Sox met in the World Series, I think part of the city would burn itself to the ground. I don't know how you feel about it, Greg, but like there's such I can't speak for the Mets and Yankees, but there's such a deep-seated, I don't know, would you call it a hatred between the two teams' fan bases in some instances, or no? I don't know.
I think it would heat up if we did have a crosstown World Series. I know who would love it, since you brought it up, Justin. I know I've mentioned it to you guys, but my dad would.
He loves both teams, right?
Because he loves anything Chicago, and the man is like physically and mentally damaged from all the Chicago losing, especially the Bears. The man was a nervous wreck in 2005 when the White Sox were in the World Series. He did not watch a single game because he couldn't take it if they lost. in 2016 he couldn't handle it if we couldn't watch the Cubs games. He actually had to leave my house once because the Cubs were we had the Cubs on. So
I was rocking in the fetal position that night.
He couldn't take it. So
was that the Steve Bartman game? He must have had the
no, see, getting back to 03, Jay, he did watch that for some. I remember I was watching the game with my dad when that happened, and it was a little bit confusing at first, and I think more of the Bartman stuff kind of like came forth the next day, and all of a sudden we knew where this guy worked, we knew where he lived.
Yeah, that got scary really quick.
He had to evacuate Illinois within 24 hours for that aftermath.
Yeah, because I was curious about how you guys reacted to Steve Bartman at the time. That whole
I don't know, Vinny. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was one of those. Immediately, I felt like Moises Alou, if he wouldn't have had that animated reaction where he's throwing his hands up, I don't think anyone makes a big deal about it. Honestly, I kind of felt bad for the guy. I think he got pigeonholed. Yeah. Anybody in that position is going to grab for that ball. I mean, there were people over there that were all pointing fingers at him, but then you look back at the tape, they were all grabbing too. So it was just luck of the draw. If anything, I'm almost glad it didn't happen in today's society, because he would have been crucified with social media. People, I mean, granted, we had MySpace maybe in 2003. I don't remember, but people trying to find out where he, doxing him and stuff like that, finding where he lived and his employer and all that. And I feel bad for the guy. Like, he really got the short end of the stick. I don't know, Vinny, I know you're the other Cubs fan on the show. What was your take on all that?
Yeah, I totally bought into the whole Bartman. It happened in the moment. I was freaking out. I'm like, what are you doing grabbing for that ball?
Yeah.
Come on, you're wearing Cubs gear. Why are you doing this? Just stand there and let the ball hit you.
Yeah.
They had the double play ball that they should have turned. And
Alex Gonzalez. Yeah.
As soon as that happened, I knew instantly.
Oh, it's over. It's done.
I didn't even watch Game 7 because I knew they weren't going to win. Whatsoever.
Momentum shifted.
Oh, it changed in a heartbeat. I can't remember what documentary it was, but I want to say, was it Derek Lee and Ivan Rodriguez, or Pudge Rodriguez? One of them turned to the other one and said, all right, we're going to make that kid famous. Or maybe it was Gary Sheffield. I don't remember if he was playing in Florida at that point, but they were determined to turn the tide at that point, which, man, thank God for 16. Otherwise, I think I'd still be living in 03. So
a lot of Cubs fans still are living in 03.
Yeah, they
haven't let that go yet.
No, they haven't. There's a lot of weird Cubs fans.
Jack, so you kind of touched on it, but kind of, I guess, after the 86 team went on to play well, but they never captured another NL pennant, and then most of the players ended up being released by 1990. Many of the dealings with the personal issues and management was making financial decisions. But many of the players were saying that the spring training 87, it didn't feel the same in the clubhouse. How heavy did the Mets craze die down in the following seasons after the World Series? Or was it still going strong? I know for, Cub fans in 2016, it was kind of similar. We won the World Series, and then it's, seemed to kind of go downhill after that. And, they got close the season after, but then after that, it wasn't nearly the same.
No.
After disappointment. So I guess, how heavy was that Mets craze after the 86 season?
I remember it, honestly, I know, like, in hindsight, it does feel like it trailed off, but, I remember being just as enthusiastic about the 87 team and the 88 team and the 89 team, as I was, because you always had that hope in the air at the start of every season. So, it wasn't until, and like I said, they did come close in 88. They got to that Game 7 NLCS game. So, the thing is that we didn't all sort of realize the obstacles that the players were dealing with, on and off, off the field, with especially with Dallas Stroy, their addiction issues and stuff. I think at the start of the 87 season, I think it was I think it was Gooden who went into rehab. So like they had, they had to deal with those problems on a personal level that I think the fans weren't necessarily, even though we were aware of it, we knew that they had drug problems. I don't think we really sort of realized the scope of, and we didn't really have a good understanding of addiction. Like, you know,
that's true.
When you really, you know, at that time, you sort of blamed the addict for being an addict, and sort of, instead of sort of realizing, well, no, this is a person who needs help, and addiction is a real disease that, you know, that, you know, as a society, we need to be, you know, get them the tools to sort of help them rather than judge them and sort of blame them. So I feel like even the front office sort of, you know, put it in that perspective of like blaming the players as individuals, which I think was the wrong thing to do. You know, and they each, you know, I mean, obviously Dwight Gooden, you know, went on to pitch for the Yankees and pitched no hitter and stuff. So and you know, Darryl Strawberry also went to the Yankees and had success there too. So like, you know, they all sort of overcame their demons, but you know, as a fan you know, especially as a kid at that time, you wanted them to win now, and like, you know, you don't realize sort of the struggles that they were going through. And I sent Greg a photo. I did end up meeting Darryl Strawberry because he opened up a restaurant. I think this is after he appeared on The Apprentice. He opened up his restaurant in Queens, and we would go there, and like my wife and I, and this was my son, you know, had just been born. I went there with my mom and my wife and Tommy and stuff, and we would go there regularly. They had a great like pulled pork nachos dish that we.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, that we would always look forward to having. And a few years later, the restaurant closed and stuff. But we would go there regularly. It was nice to meet him. And then I did end up going to a signing that Dwight Gooden did a few years after that. And then at that time, I think it was after Gary Carter passed away, because I had like a Gary Carter like tribute shirt on, and he actually said, "Oh, I like that shirt," and so that was a nice moment, you know.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Wow.
So it was cool. Yeah, I mean, and then obviously, you know, Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling are the color commentators for the Mets games on SNY here in New York and New Jersey. Yeah, so you get to hear them cover the Mets games, and it's great to hear their insights and stuff. Yeah, no, so yeah, it's. I mean, I just found the documentary really fascinating to sort of, you know, get that sort of behind the scenes sort of perspective into what things were like then for the players, and it's sort of, yeah, I mean, it brought back a flood of memories.
I will say, Jack, when I was watching it, I think the three most honest and open interviews that were part of the documentary were Doc Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, and Keith Hernandez. You know, Keith opening up about his relationship with his father and everything was all very, you know, you know, shocking almost.
I didn't know that. Like, Keith Hernandez would call his father after every at bat, and his father would sort of judge him and tell him what he was doing wrong. It's
unbelievable. Yeah.
Wow. And it got to the point where he blew up at his father. It's like, you know, and stopped talking to his father. You know, and like and like in the documentary, it's like no other player got, you know, went to the phone after every at bat to call their dad. I mean, and then like it was just, and then obviously, you know, Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, and even Lenny Dykstra was.
Lenny Dykstra was an incredible in this in this documentary.
I mean, he's probably the most candid. He curses the most. Like you know, luckily, because I think on the original broadcast they didn't censor out the cursing. So I made sure to DVR that one. I think in subsequent broadcasts they did end up censoring a lot of that out. But yeah, no, I mean, he just, you know. I mean, he was just a wild character, and I know him also because in recent years he's been on the Howard Stern show. And like he talks about, like, you know, like, basically he talks about cunnilingus a lot on the Howard Stern show. So like, it's just hearing him. It's you never know what you're gonna get when you
exactly. Well, hearing him talk about baseball too was super surprising. I mean, because I think I felt like out of all this group, I think he's like served the most time maybe out of all these guys. Yeah, just hearing what a smart baseball guy is too was really, because he would talk, he would kind of talk like on field, stuff and everything, and situational baseball. I mean, albeit very brief, but he was very charismatic, I thought, throughout the for his portions of the interviews. But one moment I wanted to bring up to you, Jack, and I thought it was Doc Gooden's most dramatic, emotional moment of the documentary was when he was explaining how he missed the World Series parade, because immediately after they won the World Series, the first phone call he made, or one of the first two phone calls he made, was to his drug dealer, his cocaine dealer. And he was out of commission the next morning and missed the parade. And when they kind of zoomed in on him on his interview, you could tell like that was a moment of realization in his life. It was very shocking and very powerful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was definitely an eye-opening moment, and like there are a lot of moments like that in the documentary that like even as a fan, there was stuff that I learned that I didn't know before, and I knew about Dwight Gooden missing the parade and stuff, but I don't think he's ever really gone on record like he did there, sort of describing where he was and like sort of and really confronting what it is to sort of miss the parade and stuff. Obviously he did experience that success with the Yankees years later, but I'm sure for him it wasn't the same as that initial. And also that 86 season was sort of like a mediocre season for him, like it comes off of the 85 and 84 season
where he was unhittable almost, right.
And for him, like he was okay that season. Like he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't sort of, he didn't live up to
his old self.
Yeah. And that had to do with his, with his addiction problems and stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just really, for anyone who hasn't sort of checked out that documentary yet, definitely look for it on, it's that ESPN 30 for 30, Once Upon a Time in Queens. It's a really great documentary.
I know when I think I speak for all of us, or the three of us, when I say that, I think our extensive knowledge of the 86 Mets came from Seinfeld.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Yeah.
With Keith Hernandez, Roger McDowell, and
the Magic Loogie.
And the obviously the famous Bill Buckner botched ground ball. So that was about it. So definitely learned a lot about this team and about this season. It was all real interesting, almost like a whole cast of movie star guys on a baseball team. So like I said, Keith Hernandez up until this point was his two episodes on Seinfeld, Magic Loogie.
Yeah, so. Obviously I love those episodes. I mean, I'm a big Seinfeld fan, so I remember when those episodes came out. I was like, oh yeah, and obviously that coincided with the whole JFK,
stuff. The Kevin Costner film,
So it was funny. Like I'm surprised he didn't do more like little cameo stints.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, he was good in it.
He was good in it. So,
so like I said, if you haven't seen that yet, Once Upon a Time in Queens, 4-part ESPN 30 for 30 film, extremely well done. Before we let you go here, Jack, I just want to ask you, and thank you again for coming on, obviously. Getting back to your Mets currently, if we ever, get out of this lockout, hopefully, looks like at this point we might be losing games, but is there another move or two you'd like to see the Mets make whenever that moment comes forth, I suppose.
I would like. I mean, the Mets could always use bullpen help, so I would like to sort of shore up the bullpen. I wouldn't mind getting Chris Bryant if they do decide to go in that direction. But yes, because I mean, you can always use hitting. But yeah, I mean, I'm feeling pretty confident about the lineup and about the starting pitching. And we'll see if they do add Rondon or someone else to the starting rotation. And I think Trevor Williams might end up either as like the fifth starter, or he might end up in the bullpen. And I think they're talking about bringing back Juris Familia.
Okay, yeah.
So that would be a good move for them to do. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I definitely would like to see them improve the bullpen.
Well, the Mets have definitely been were definitely one of the more interesting, exciting teams before the lockout. So hopefully we'll get to talk about some moves all around baseball coming up here soon. But I guess we'll see how that goes. So
yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping the lockout ends. I hope we don't lose games. That would be
I hope not either. We'll see though.
No, especially when we do a baseball podcast. It's like perfect timing. It's like, great.
Well, you get to rant about the lockout if
that's true. That's true. And if there's one thing we do well here, it's rant about things that that's one of our claim to fames.
Hey, you have a baseball podcast, and then you get to do episodes about how there's no baseball.
Yep, exactly.
Jack, so you're a big New York Giants fan, and the Bears just handed the Giants a good long 29-3 this last Sunday when the Giants had to throw Mike Glennon out there, the ex-QB1. But the Bears they're going to be cleaning house this off season. Supposedly, that's all the reporting has been going.
We can only hope, right?
What's the outlook like for the Giants this offseason? Are they set to make some big changes? Because they didn't have a good season at all.
That's putting it mildly. The Giants are not. It's actually kind of unusual because, like, usually if you're a Mets fan, you're automatically a Jets fan. But I grew up being a Mets and Giants fan. So I mean, I don't hate the Jets. So I if they're successful, which they haven't been. So if they're successful, I wouldn't complain. Like I wouldn't mind seeing the Jets do well. But I've been it's been not fun being a Giants fan. Especially I think since like 2017, I think the Jets and the Giants have the same record, or the Jets might even be better actually. It's hard to tell, but actually the Jets look more promising than the Giants because I feel like Zach Wilson, like he has the potential is there, whereas I don't feel that with Daniel Jones. Like I don't feel like the Giants really have. I'm not very confident in Daniel Jones as the future of the franchise. Quarterback and stuff. Whereas I think Zach Wilson has that potential if he has the right receivers and they build a team around him. The Jets could end up going somewhere. I don't see that much hope for the Giants. I mean, they need to improve the offensive line and give Daniel Jones a chance. But I think even when he has a chance, he telegraphs his throws. Like I feel like defenders, it's very easy to defend against him because you can always tell which receiver he's reading.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw it. I saw a meme on Twitter of Mike Glennon, and it was his career earnings from each team, and it was just his neck getting longer and longer as he got more earnings.
I was about to say, the thing with Mike Glennon is they make fun of his, they call him a giraffe.
I feel bad, but then I looked at how much money he's made. I'm like, you can make fun of anything about me as you want.
He's made some decent coin in the
I think it was like 60 to 70 million he's made over his career, and
I feel like
not good.
From the Bears.
I was going to say the Bears were a big part of that.
That's what makes it the worst. I guess in closing, Jack, is there anything you'd like to plug? Any shows, anything coming up you'd like to tell our listeners, and hopefully they'll go check you out?
Basically, yeah, if you haven't checked out Bond and Banter yet, I don't know when I'm gonna, because I took a break for the holidays and sort of just still kind of recovering and getting into the new year. So I don't know when I'll do new episodes, but if you haven't checked out Bond and Banter yet, there's about 30 episodes worth. Check it out. We talk Bond, we talk other movies and books and music, and check out JBR. They're also on a little bit of a hiatus. I'm not sure when that podcast is coming back, but there are some fantastic discussions on No Time to Die that they've done recently, and there was one that I was a part of, and then there was also another one they did afterwards that included more people who didn't like the film, and that's even more fun.
I can imagine.
And that was a 4-hour episode when I just got done listening to, so that was definitely a stretch right there. There was some little more negativity on that one.
So I was a part of a group that was like more in favor of, and it just worked out. Like it wasn't on purpose. Like basically they just, whoever was available that day got to be on the podcast, and it just happened to be like 4 guys who kind of liked the film, and then then people started complaining. Oh well, why did you have only people who liked the film on? So they did another episode of people who are more dissenters and had more negative reactions to the film, which is great to hear. Like I actually enjoy hearing different perspectives and stuff. It's kind of boring. It would be boring if everyone liked the same thing.
For sure.
So yeah, definitely check out James Bond Radio and Bond and Banter.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, I mean, again, if anyone's listening, they'd like to reach out to us, you can email us at baseballwhatever@gmail.com, or our official podcast network email is baseballwhateverpodcast at bellyupsports.com. You can go to facebook.com/baseballwhatever. You can find us on Twitter at baseballandwhat. I think that's everything. I feel like I say that so many times. It's starting to lose all meaning. I don't know.
I think you've just got it memorized.
Pretty much.
It flowed perfectly.
So I guess, I don't know, Vinny, Greg, you guys got anything else to add before we wrap this up?
Go ahead, Vinny.
I don't. Although I do have one more question. I guess this is for you, Greg and Jack. So I've been getting into Bond Twitter, and it was a Sheriff J.W. Pepper. Is that right? Yeah. So that guy's a character on Twitter, and so I had to go watch some of his scenes in the Bond movies, and there was like a highlight clip of him. I have to ask you guys, what is with the slide whistle and the jump of the car? Has that ever been discussed on why they did that?
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's
full episodes, Vinny, dedicated to that one scene.
Really?
Yeah, one of the greatest car stunts ever performed, because it was
all done for real.
It was all done for real. This is all, obviously now you have CGI. There are ways to do those kinds of stunts, but it's like they did a real one of the best car stunts ever, and they put a slide, and it was actually John Barry who did the score, who decided to put the slide whistle in, and then he regretted it. And they asked him about it later on. He's like, "Yeah, I shouldn't have done that." But there are fans to this day who they know when it's coming, and they mute their TV sets. They mute the film at that exact moment for like a few seconds so that they don't hear it. To me, it's just a part of the film and stuff. So I've come to get used to it. But yeah, unfortunately, it's one of the best car stunts ever, and they decided to sort of tarnish it a little bit by adding a slide whistle.
Yeah, it kind of takes away. I mean, some people it kind of takes away the believability of it, because trying to explain, no, they actually did that. They're like, oh yeah, with that silly little cartoon whistle in there or whatever. And like you asked, Vinny, do people still talk about it? Yes, it is this. I mean, it is. If you get into some of the fans right here, even these podcasts, I mean, there will be segments, episodes, 2 hours plus dedicated to just that scene and why it took place. But it's a good question though. It's and he's good at Sheriff J.W. Pip is always good on Twitter. So, and one of my favorite Bond characters. So Hopefully he joins Bond and Banter soon. I'm hoping so.
Yeah,
there we go. Excellent. Greg, you got anything else?
Jack, thank you so much again for coming on, and it was a lot of fun. Great to hear your perspectives on everything. Thank you for turning our attention to that documentary. And it's hopefully we'll have you on again soon. We know you're a big Seinfeld fan now, so we're gonna have to explore that a little bit more. You guys
like
Curb
too? Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I just started watching it. I'm enjoying it so far. I missed when it started a decade back. I missed out on that. So
yeah, I'm catching up on it as well. So
I'm all about Larry David now. So I'm all in on it. All right. Well, Jack, thank you. Vinny, thank you. Greg, thank you. We will be back next week with your regularly scheduled podcast. Hopefully, if all goes according to plan. I don't know. Otherwise,
hopefully I don't fall asleep.
That's all right.
Or I'm not ill.
No worries. Yeah, that's the main thing. We don't need anybody ill. But anyway, thanks again for listening, and we will see you guys all next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.